Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Maureen, are we good to go now?
Yes, you can start.
Right. Good morning, our colleagues joining us from America and Canada. Good afternoon, East Africa and parts of the South, probably the whole of the South. Good afternoon in West Africa already. And the Seychelles, we say good evening. We are most welcome to this Accosca organized webinar. For those of us who are fortunate to be on this program this afternoon and morning, we are looking at the value of emotional intelligence on Sacco Leadership. And our great facilitator will be introduced to you soon. A few housekeeping issues, those of us who are already on, that you are muted, you will not be able to participate in the conversations. You still have the opportunity to share your questions and comments using the usual channels. The webinar will be recorded and will be shared via our website, the Accosca website. We encourage all participants to communicate through the presentation using the question section provided on the screen, top right-hand corner. For those using mobile phones, click on the question mark icon on your screen to type in comments and queries. For more information, you can email Accosca at info@accosca.org. Moving on, this a very important topic for all of us at a time when we are dealing with an unusual pandemic. Gerry Singleton is our facilitator this afternoon. He's Vice President of Credit Union System Relations for CUNA Mutual Group, responsible for establishing, strengthening, and maintaining relations with credit union, trade organizations, and state leagues, that is in the United States. He joined CUNA Mutual in 1998 as the Senior Manager of Product Learning. He is a super master facilitator in personified leadership programs, as well as the experiential facilitation program. Gerry is a very well experienced facilitator who does it by the book. Make sure you understand. And I keep saying, if Gerry gives it to you and you're not getting it through his facilitation, where were you? I really don't know where you were actually. So this is an opportunity for all of us to listen to a great guy in this particular domain. Gerry, you're welcome to Africa, albeit remotely. We wish this was physical. It's not possible. We all know why. But you have an audience in Africa and beyond. Currently, you have more than 34 people listening to you. We are all excited to join you on this journey. I turn the microphone onto you to take us through this presentation. Thank you very much. It's over to you, Gerry, at the other end of the world.
All right. Thank you and hello. And Droop, as you said, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And I thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I really wish I could be there in person. I just was thinking yesterday that it's been 2 years since I was there, and I had plans to be there this October.
Right.
And obviously that's not going to happen. So we'll be here virtually, I guess, is the way it will work. So I was looking at my pictures of going through the DE program, and going through the facilitation program and going to the MARA and how fantastic and amazing that was. And I miss it greatly, as well as the wonderful people from the Saccos.
Absolutely.
So,
Thank you.
So this morning we're going to talk, or this afternoon, for most of you, we're going to talk about emotional intelligence, otherwise known as EQ. And you've probably heard the term EQ or emotional intelligence before. I don't know about you, but this pandemic, the coronavirus, is proving to be really one of the greatest challenges, and you could say opportunities, but one of the greatest challenges for leaders in our lifetime, probably in a generation, if you think about it. As the axiom goes, when the time for before performance has come, the time for preparation is past. So you really have to dig deep and see what leaders are made of. And that's where we are right now. In fact, the global crisis is probably revealing more so than creating leaders. It's revealing leaders that were there all along. And it's doing it very quickly. And in this current context of the pandemic, there's perhaps no leadership skill for Sacco leaders and for others that's more important than emotional intelligence. So think about emotional intelligence really as the ability to interact effectively with other humans. You know, it has several components, and we'll talk about those today just as an introduction. This is really an introduction to the topic. We could go any number of ways and go very deeply. But things like awareness, things like perception, things like regulation, those all fit into the topic of emotional intelligence. But at its core, at its base, at its root, it really is, as a leader, can you lead through empathy? Can you lead through influence? And can you lead through collaboration? So think of emotional intelligence as your delivery system. In fact, it's like your body's delivery system to deliver your intelligence or your IQ. So EQ delivers IQ. And as a leader, it's how we convey knowledge, skills, experiences in order to drive performance and results, and also bring the team along as we go so that we can better serve our members through our SACCOs. Now, the good news is emotional intelligence can be learned. Unlike personalities are pretty much, we are who we are, right, from a very young age. Emotional intelligence, however, is something that we can actually learn and develop. And by the end of today, I'll give you some resources so that you also can start to practice and develop in specific areas within this. So when it's time for a crisis, when crisis hits and we're all facing a crisis of global proportions, it's go time, right? Juf, I'm sure you've heard that phrase. It's go time, right? And it's pressurized everything for all of us. Yep, it's go time, right? So it's pressurized
That's right.
In our personal lives as well as our professional lives. And in that context, it's really those leaders who can act best with composure and exceptional self-control. And you might be a great gifted leader and an intelligent leader, but if you wilt under stress, or really you are not able to handle the pressure or the strains of a crisis, then it's hard to lead people where we need them to go. So let's jump into our objectives for today. And I'm trying to, oh, there we go. So we have a few objectives for today, which you can see on the screen. And again, this is an overview. In the time that we have today, this will just be touching the surface, but we're going to talk about that 4-domain model of emotional intelligence. And within that are 18 competencies. Now, we're not going to talk about all 18. I'll show you what they are. And in fact, at the end, you'll have a self-assessment that you can complete. So you can start to take a look at where you might fall on these 18 different competencies as a leader. We're going to talk about that connection, the direct connection between emotional intelligence and leadership. And then within that leadership realm, we're going to see the different hats we wear. So 6 different styles of leadership and how they relate to positive or resonant leadership. Then we'll talk about the competencies as a takeaway for you all, to have a conversation with another leader, to start talking through how you might effectively develop or lead others through development of some of these competencies. And then finally, building an action plan. So, Juf, you know me fairly well from our time together. I'm really big on interaction and conversation, and also follow-up. And so there will be some follow-up for each of you to do, a handout that Accosca will send you later so that you can have some follow-up opportunities. So I live in the United States.
Perfect.
And I live in a state called Montana. It's in the western part of the country, and it's up near the Canadian border. We have the Big Five, right? You guys talk about the Big Five in the Mara. And when I was in the Mara, I saw 4 of the 5. I was missing one, but I almost saw 5 of the Big Five. Well, I live near Yellowstone National Park. And in that park, we have the Big Five. We have things like bison, elk, moose, the bighorn sheep, and also grizzly bears. You know what? We're wired as humans. We're wired to experience life, to experience situations, events, emotionally first, before we experience those same events rationally. So maybe the best way to describe it is by telling a story. So, like I said, I live in near a national park that has a lot of wildlife, not unlike what you would experience if you go to the Mara. And imagine, if you will, that once upon a time, you were walking. Oh, I'm trying to click my slides here.
Yeah.
Maureen, I thought I clicked it, but it didn't.
Okay, I'll do it from my end. It's
okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Right.
There we go. So imagine that once upon a time that I was walking in the forest here in our national park, and I came across a big, bad, click. Maureen, I'll just say click. A big, bad bear, a big, bad grizzly bear. And actually, this has happened to me before. So your eyes saw that bear. So go ahead and click one more time if you would, Maureen. Your eyes saw the bear, right? My eyes saw that bear, and it was not fun. In fact, I got between two bears one time, and that was really not fun. So immediately, that message was sent a signal down to my adrenal glands, right? And my adrenal glands started pumping adrenaline into my system. That made my heart to start beating faster. My breathing started quickening. My palms got sweaty. Muscles started tensing up. And I was prepared. Go ahead and click again, Maureen, and then click again if you would. You can see what's happening to the body as we're moving forward. I'm going to see if I do this. No.
Maureen, yeah.
There we go. So you can see what's happening to the body when those things happen. Your body starts, getting ready to. And click one more time. Fight or flight. Right. This is what happens to the body. We're going to talk before we go into emotional intelligence. We need to actually talk about emotion and talk about where it comes from, because not all of us face grizzly bears in our daily lives. Right. You don't find a grizzly bear in your Sacco very often, but we do experience situations that have those similar things. Have you been in a meeting before, or in a really difficult conversation or situation where all those things started happening? Your breathing quickened. Your heart started beating faster. Your palms got sweaty. You started to feel that stress. I don't know about you, but I know I've seen that, and that's a part of the brain that's a very basic part of the brain that triggers us to fight or flight. And before we can think rationally about it, we start thinking emotionally about it, and that's an important factor for leaders to understand. So now I make a story about when I was in Nairobi 2 years ago. So I was in Nairobi and staying downtown, and we were staying in a hotel, and I like to walk around the city to learn more about the city. So as I was walking around the city, I always forget when I'm traveling internationally about which side of the road the drivers are on, right? And in Kenya, you all drive on a different side of the road than we drive on here in the United States. So I'm just walking along, and I look to make sure nobody's coming, right? Yeah. And then I step out into the crosswalk, and I hear honk, honk, honk. There was a bus barreling down right at me because I failed to look the proper way, right? I looked the way I was used to looking, but not the other way. And so that the bus started honking, Juve, and I immediately backed up. Now that was this part of the brain getting triggered. It was the emotional part of the brain that said, am I going to survive or not? And it caused me to automatically step back from the curb. Now think about what would have happened if I had let my more rational brain kick in first. As I'm stepping across and I see the bus, I might say, okay, I wonder how the brakes are. I wonder, right? If I started thinking about all these things, I probably would not have survived that experience. Because our brains kicked in immediately for that fight or flight, I was able to step back quickly. Then then rational thought comes into it. So that's just a quick example of what might happen. Sometimes you're in a meeting and might have something similar as well. So Maureen, if you would click, please. Let's go a little bit deeper into the anatomy of an emotion, and then we'll jump into emotional intelligence.
Right.
Okay, if you would click, please.
Can I allow you to do it from your end? Let's see if
yes,
you're able to hear you.
That would be great. I'm clicking all kinds of things. Let me know what I need to click. I'm doing arrows and
click the place that's showing share my screen. Can you see that?
Oh, and you want me to use my screen?
Yes.
Yes, for the slides, that would be more convenient.
Okay. I'm not exactly seeing where that is. You'll have to help me get there.
Can you see anywhere that has something like a screen?
Yes, it says view in screen mode. Make another attendee the presenter.
Is it telling
Show
you to
screen.
share
So
my
here
screen?
we go. Here we go. Show screen. Let's try this.
Yeah.
Are you seeing? Can you see the screen?
No. If you click it, it's going to turn green. Yes, there.
You see it?
Since
Good.
we are there now.
Okay. Now let's see.
If
Now is
you,
it moving forward? Can you see?
yeah, we're seeing it. If you can just go one step further and put it on presentation mode. So the slides are a little bit bigger.
Oh, now we got to switch probably. Let's try that. Did that do it?
If you click down there where it shows view full screen on the slide itself.
Yeah, so it's switched. I have two monitors, and so it's showing you the wrong monitor, so I'm trying to switch it over to the other one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, we were there.
Right.
Did that do it?
Yes.
Right.
Okay. All right, well, let's continue. Sorry for that, everyone. Thanks for your patience as we work through that. All right, so as we talk about the emotion piece, it's really a signal. So just when I saw that grizzly bear, right, and all those things started happening in my body, what my mind is saying, it goes all the way back to ancient times, right, where I'm saying, do I eat it or does it eat me, right? And that's what I'm looking at. And then I make that decision. So it really, the emotion is a signal to take action. And that's why it's called an emotion, right? That's why it's called an emotion, because it has motion or action in it. So think about it in terms of leadership, right? As we go into leadership, we want to make sure that we're able to use those same gifts, if you will, of the emotion, but use them in a positive way that's going to benefit everyone so that we can better serve our members. So let's talk about it from the brain's perspective. There are really three parts of our brain that come into play when we're talking about emotion and emotional intelligence. The first one really is the brain stem itself. That's the reptilian brain. That's the very beginning. That's where fight or flight comes in. That's where the adrenal glands and the amygdala, right, and those kinds of things that we talked about earlier that cause that initial reaction for us to get ready to either run or fight. That's where we see that. Then we have the limbic system or the mammalian brain. This is where emotions really reside, and it's tied back to our memories. So we will have experiences as a young child, right, or as others, and those experiences create memories for us. So those early memories that are tied to emotion are stored in the limbic system. And when we have experiences as adults, those experiences then trigger back to some of those memories that we've had to see. Is this a positive experience? Is it a stressful experience? Is it something that's going to cause me pain so that I can react differently? And then finally, we have the thinking brain or the neocortex. This is where the higher functions of the brain are. This is what separates us from humans from everything else and everyone else, is the thinking brain itself, the neocortex. And all of those come into play when we're talking about emotion, and especially when we're talking about emotional intelligence and what we do about it. So now and this is the heavy part, and then we'll get more into the fun part in just a minute. So really, if you think about it, we're saber-toothed tigers with smartphones, trying to figure out life, right, and what this is all about. So let's go into a definition of emotional intelligence. So if we're going to be successful, right, we have to use our intelligence, our actual IQ, but we have to mirror that with our conduit, or how we convey that to the world around us so that we can make a difference. And that's the emotional intelligence, or EQ. Daniel Goleman is considered the father, or the guru, if you will, of emotional intelligence. And he's done work in this most of his entire career. And his quote says, "The rules of work are changing. We're being judged by a new yardstick, not just by how smart we are or by our training and expertise, but also by how well we handle ourselves and one another." Very important thing, if you think about it. So our intelligence alone is not enough. We have to go deeper into that. So emotional intelligence, as defined by Jeff Feldman and Carl Muell in Putting Intelligence to Work, is to use your emotions intelligently to gain the performance that you want to see within yourself, and then to achieve interpersonal effectiveness with others. Within our industry, within the credit union and Sacco industry, a few years ago, the Feline Research Institute, many of you may have heard of that. It's the think tank for credit unions in the United States, and they do work here and abroad as well, and do a lot of research. A few years ago, they did a research on credit union CEOs, so Sacco and credit union CEOs, the leaders of the organization, and they said, let's look at what they know, so their intelligence. Let's look at their personality, which also included emotional intelligence aspects, and then let's look at things like performance appraisals, work practices, job descriptions, right? Those kinds of things, and say which of them have the most important impact on the credit union or the Sacco success. And when they did the research, they realized it was the CEO's personality and their ability to leverage emotional intelligence had a bigger impact than anything else. Juf, that blew me away when I read that research report. It didn't matter what the CEO knew. Yeah. It didn't matter what he or she actually knew. It's how they applied it and how they kind of rallied the teams to serve their members and to achieve their goals. It was all about this emotional intelligence piece that made all the difference on the Sacco. I thought that was really important and very powerful.
Absolutely.
So let's look at the specific aspects of emotional intelligence. There are really four in the workplace, and as leaders, there are really four areas. Two of them deal with us personally, and the other two deal with those around us and how we respond and react to them. So the first two are self-awareness, right? So I need to recognize when that bear comes at me, I need to recognize what those feelings and emotions and behaviors are. So I need to be aware of that. And then I need to do something about it, right? So self-management, I need to be able to manage those feelings and behaviors. I need to stay motivated during this time of crisis. I don't know about you, but I used to travel for work, and my last trip was in March, and I traveled at least 2 to 3, sometimes 4 times a month, and it's been zero, right? So it's different. Yeah, you have to change your mindset altogether on what that's about. The other two really deal with the world around us and how we interact and respond to the world around us. So the social awareness, this is understanding what others feel. This is where empathy falls in, frankly. This is where you would see empathy. And then relationship management. How do we build rapport? How do we collaborate with other people? How do we influence to make a difference? How do we develop our teams as leaders, etc.? Those things fall into relationship management. And if you've seen me present before or interact with experiential learning, I like the 4-box, right? The 2x2 square. And I like it a lot. If you've seen me do these on other topics too. So
I can confirm that. I can confirm.
Yes, that's fantastic. So if we take, I'm going to back up one. So if we take these 4 areas, 2 dealing with ourselves and 2 dealing with the world around us, and we put them in a 2x2 grid, you'll see here that across the top, so the 2 columns, you have one around personal competence, and then the second one's around social competence. So am I capable, right? What's my competence to be self-aware and to manage or regulate myself? And then what's my social competence? How am I able to be aware socially of those around me and also then manage those relationships and do something around it? So if you look down the two rows, you see recognition. That's the first step or the first stage in emotional intelligence. And then the second piece is regulation. What am I going to do about it? Put the context of this global pandemic across all of these areas, and you'll see that we have we need to tap into all of them in order to be leaders within our SACCOs and our entire industry across the world. So now let's look at the competencies. This is where there are 18 of them. We're not going to go into all of them in detail. There will be a self-assessment afterwards that you can complete on your own to look at where you might have some strengths and gifting naturally, and where areas might be that you want to explore and do just a little bit more work. So here under self-awareness, you'll see these three competencies of self-awareness. So as I'm going through them, I'm not going to read them or describe them. You can see them on your own. But think about in each of these areas, probably the one that stands out to you that, hey, I'm pretty good at this. I think I'm pretty self-aware or self-confident, right? Or I think I have a pretty good understanding of who I am. So think about one that stands out for you that you are pretty good at. And then think about another one that you say, maybe I want to work on this one a little bit more. Because as I mentioned, at the end, there'll be some resources for you if you want to dig deeper to start developing some of these competencies. There are 6 under self-management. So you'll see them here. So same thing. So this is under the personal competence category. So the first step is to be self-aware using those competencies. And then we got to do something about it. How can I demonstrate that self-control? How can I be authentic and transparent? How can I show initiative? And during this time, the last one is especially important. How can I maintain optimism in a world that's just in chaos right now on many, many levels, not just the pandemic, but on social unrest that we're experiencing here in the United States and other areas of the world, and the economy, right? Are we in a recession? Are we headed to a depression? What is it going to be like? How do we as leaders maintain that optimism so that we can bring our teams along so that we also then therefore can help there? Then we look at the social awareness competencies. So this, as I mentioned before, is where empathy comes in. From a leader, you'll notice as SACCOs and credit union leaders, being aware of our organization and how we're doing the work that we're doing, how we're serving our members, that's really important. And then having a service orientation is vital in our industry. And frankly, during that study that I mentioned, that personality study that took place, these 3 areas of empathy, organizational awareness, and service orientation were what separated credit union and SACCO leaders from leaders in other industries as well. These were the ones that helped us to stand apart. And if you think about it, and I know you guys have had some sessions, some other webinars on empathy and other topics. If you think about it, that's what our industry is about, right? That's why we were formed. That's why SACCOs and credit unions exist, is so that we can better serve our members. And then finally, there are 6 competencies under the relationship side within the social competence category. Several things like being an inspirational leader. And Juf, I've heard you present many times. I value you and see you as an inspirational leader. You provide inspiration, you encourage, and you challenge other people in a very positive way. So that's something I've noticed in your leadership.
I'm humbled.
And you'll see here, you can see other ones. This is where the team aspect comes in. This is where developing other people comes in. I lead a small team of people here at CUNA Mutual Group where I work. And we have focused a lot on our own development during this time of pandemic as we are working differently, working virtually, figuring things out. We've needed to learn new skills. And so we've spent a lot of time on developing one another and challenging one another in those areas. So that's digging into these skills in particular. So think about them in whole now. Look at all 18 of these. And again, as I asked earlier, just take a minute and look at them. Think about the ones that maybe are the ones that are natural for you, the ones you're pretty good at already. And then think about maybe 1 or 2 or 3 that you could focus on to have some additional work. All right, and these materials will be available for you so you can go back and mark them up and make some notes as well. So what does all this have to do with leadership? Well, as we go into it, we'll find the research, the current brain research shows that the brain is an open loop. Unlike other systems within the body, so for example, the circulatory system, right? All the stuff that's inside me that's circulating blood and all of those things, it is not dependent. Juf, my circulatory system is not dependent upon yours for survival, right? So
Okay.
it works independently. However, the brain, actually, the current research shows the brain's an open loop. What that means is it needs the world around it. Right? So what my experience is, it needs the experiences of Juf and others around the world or within my circle. It needs that interaction to really have a healthy operating system. That's unique to humans, and it's also unique to that particular system, the brain. If you think about it that way. I don't know if you've read some articles I've seen during this COVID-19 pandemic. There have been some interesting preliminary research around dreams, right? Some people have said, I've experienced really strange dreams during COVID. And it's not just individuals who have contracted COVID, but it's people who don't have the virus. And what they're realizing is, because we are so isolated now, the brain is trying to figure out how to interact with the world around it. Normally we have actual experiences, right? I'm out on a trip, or I'm out in my community, I'm at church, I'm at the park, and I'm interacting and experiencing with other people. In this time of isolation, we don't have that as much. And so the brain is trying to compensate. And so one of the ways it does that is through dreams. And so it's been really interesting. It'll be interesting to see what the case studies are, Juf, later on when they come back and look at 2020 and think about all the different things that have happened. And this one I'm especially interested in learning more about.
Right.
Yeah. Now, can you all still see my video? I'm not seeing it on my screen, but can you all see me still, Juf?
Yeah, I'm seeing you. I'm
Okay.
sure the audience, we have 75 of them hooked on. They're also seeing you.
Okay, that's
They
great.
see the
So I'm going to ask you to.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
course,
great.
yeah.
I'm going to ask you to demonstrate something with me in just a minute. So I want to make sure you can see my video. So let's talk about emotional contagion. This is part of that brain as an open loop and leadership. So the emotions that we project often get reflected right back to us in the emotions of other people. And there's a song, many of you maybe have heard the song, and it goes, I'm not going to sing it, and none of us want that, but smile and the world smiles with you, as the song goes. But it also says frown and the world will frown with you as well. So smile and the world smiles with you. I'm going to click the next slide and see if you recognize any of these folks, and then think about your own reaction when you see these pictures on the next slide, the reaction that it has in you, for each of you, the 75 of you on the line. You might recognize some of these folks. You might notice what they're all doing. There are smile after smile after smile on this. And George, that picture of you and Lois in the middle with that smile, anytime I see that picture, anytime I think of that picture, anytime I think of you, George, with that big smile on your face, I smile. And my foot starts tapping, and I just have this great positive experience. So smile, and the whole world smiles with you. It actually is contagious. Now put the context of leadership on that. So as Sacco leaders, how do we make sure that we can maintain, it doesn't mean we have to smile all the time, because sometimes times are tough, right? Sometimes we're in stressful situations. But the message is, how do we take that, knowing that others are watching us all the time, how do we take that forward as leaders so that we can make sure we're positively making a difference for our members and with our employees and with all those around us? So if you could all see my video on the screen, I'm going to ask you all 70, now we have 77. I'm going to ask every one of you to do this. So if all of you could make the OK sign, right? The OK sign, I think it's fairly universal. So every one of you make the OK sign and just do exactly what I do. What I want you to do is to take the OK sign and just move it right up to your chin. Okay, everybody doing that? All right, so I can't see you, right? I can't see you at all. But I know what I'm doing. Well, the last time I checked, this was my chin, right? So many of you probably actually put your OK sign on your cheek and not on your chin, right? So Yeah, so that's a good example, and it makes me laugh because I'm thinking most of you probably did this instead of this. But what happens is people are watching us, and they do what we do. They don't do what we say, right? And so as leaders, how do we make sure we leverage that using emotional intelligence, right? Are being self-aware and self-regulated and others aware, and being able to manage our relationships. How can we do that in a way that shows that we're able to walk the talk, right? So that we are being consistent in our words as well as our actions, because everybody's watching us. And just a simple smile, and it's not just a smile, but it's a smile with the picture, right? The story that's around that smile. I was in many of these pictures. I wasn't in the picture, but I was in the event or the experience. And I have that just brings all of that memory back to me as well. So as leaders, how do we do that? How do we help our employees and others around us see and feel and experience the positive difference we're making in our members' lives? That's what this is all about. And that's how we can leverage emotional intelligence. So as we continue in looking at at leadership and emotional intelligence, let's look at two things: resonant leadership and dissonant leadership. Resonant is on the positive side, and dissonant is on the not so positive side or the negative side. So the best leaders you see here, instead of just being motivational, we're motivational, right? We can influence and impact the mood, the entire mood or the tone of our Sacco and how we serve our members. So the two leaders I mentioned earlier, Jeff Feldman and Carl Muehl, in their book, they said the primary task of all effective leadership in organizations is to figure out ways to drive other people's emotions in a positive direction. I don't know about you, but you've probably been in team settings or leadership settings or with your board of directors or others where you might have one person who's really trying to steer it in a not so positive way, right? And the impact that can have on bringing everybody down. So think about that as far as the role of a leader really is to make sure we move people forward and use the emotion of people in a positive way to do that. Daniel Goleman described it or defined resonance. It's a reservoir, right? We mentioned during times of crisis, it's go time. We've got to dig really deep. It's a reservoir of that positivity that frees the best in people. So before we move on, I want you to think about one of the best leaders in your life that you've had. And it might be somebody that you know, it might be somebody that you've read about, it might be a world leader, a president, it could be somebody in your life, it could be your father, right, or mother. Think about a leader that you felt was a very positive leader and what made them so effective in what they did. Most of the time we would say it's not just what they knew, but it's who they were, right? Who they were as leaders, who they were really even more importantly as individuals, and how they managed their relationships, how they brought people along, how they were inspiring. So think about who that would be for you.
Yeah.
I can think of lots of people, both within the credit union world, right? The credit union movement across the world. I can think of several people. We talked about pioneers in the DE program. I think of many pioneers that I would put on that list. I think of people in my life, right, who have made a huge difference and poured themselves into me as a leader as well. So I'm sure many of you have great examples of that too. Dissonant leadership is the opposite, right? Dissonant leadership, you can read some of these words here. Dissonant leadership could also, through the open loop system, because we're so connected and interconnected, one person could bring the entire group down, if you will, by using some of these more negative tendencies. Now, I tend to focus more on the positive, so we're not going to spend a lot of time here. However, it is something that we need to be aware of as we are working through the pandemic as leaders. And once we get to the other side, beyond the pandemic and whatever that will be in the future state, how do we move from dissonant leadership, even if we have those in our circles, how do we move them from that to be resonant leaders as we talked? All right. So in Daniel Goleman's book, he talked about 6 types of leaders, or 6 types of styles of leadership. In the handout that you receive afterwards, there's a whole chart that goes into describing each of these types of leaders, the characteristics, how they apply to resonant leadership, or that very positive leadership. The first 4, starting at the top with visionary, going to the right, visionary, coaching, affiliative, and democratic, are all resonant styles of leadership, so very positive. The other 2, while they may get results, pace setting and commanding, are more dissonant styles of leadership, so they're not as positive. They could get results, and in very limited circumstances, they might be necessary. However, from an emotional intelligence perspective and a resonant leader perspective, to get positive results to serve our members, you would leverage those first 4 on a regular basis. So again, in the handout that you'll receive following this webinar, you'll have a lot more information to go deeper onto each of those. And again, probably you'll think of examples, as I did when I went through these styles, of leaders that I've had in my life and career who fit each of these categories. So let's move in now to some actions. During this pandemic, we've had to dig really deep as leaders, right? As leaders of our Saccos, as leaders of our families, leaders in our communities and all around us. We've had to dig pretty deep and do things we haven't had to do before in ways we haven't had to do them. And so let's start talking practically now. Things we can do to really focus on emotional intelligence in the workplace. So you'll see across the screen, I have 7, you, share, do. That's just a quick thing that we're going to talk about each of these as far as taking it practically into what we're going to do next. So 7. Here are 7 tips for each of us to leverage emotional intelligence in a crisis. Things that I think I've read articles and seen others speak as well. And these 7 tips resonated with me that I think will resonate with you as well. One is to balance your thinking and feeling brain. As I mentioned, we have both, right? We experience the emotion before we start experiencing the logic. The emotion comes first and then the logic comes second. How do we balance the 2? If we only use our thinking brain, and some of us by nature, right, we're more logical than feeling. So we have to work harder to make sure we're bringing the emotion in. Others of us might be focused more on the emotion first, and we lead with the emotion. We might need to think more about balancing the logic to it. And think about if that balance is not there. If you're primarily on the thinking side, people might think you are non-caring, right? You could come across as not caring. If you're only on the emotional side of things, that could create chaos and a whole lot of stress for your teams because they're not sure how you're going to react to something, especially during the crisis. So as leaders, how do we balance the 2? Most of us skew one way or the other a little bit. So we need to think about what we might be able to do to provide that balance. The second one, create psychological safety. What I mean by that is our employees, those that we lead around us, right, they're experiencing a whole lot of chaos. We are too, by the way, but we're the leaders, right? So they're experiencing a lot of chaos right now. So what can we do to make sure we're not creating circumstances to escalate that stress? What can we do to provide safety for those around us? Not only physical safety and emotional safety, but psychological safety as well. Now, people are going through different things that they've not had to experience in their lifetimes before. The third one, model empathy. Right, this is a great one for leaders. It's a great one for our industry. Model empathy. How do we demonstrate that we're putting ourselves in the shoes of others around us so that we can show that not only we understand, but we also care? And what can we do to do that? The fourth one, remember that everyone's experience is unique. I heard somebody say at my company, at CUNA Mutual, one of our leaders was sharing, and she said, you know what, during this pandemic, we're all in the same storm, but we're all in different boats. So every one of us has a different experience right now as we are living through this pandemic and this time of crisis across the globe. And each one of us has a unique experience. And as a leader, sometimes as leaders, we want to just make everything the same, right? It's easier for us. It seems like it's more fair. What we miss out, though, is on the uniqueness of the individual and the uniqueness of the person's experience and what they're going through. I would say apply that for your employees. And I also would say, how can we apply that to our members? So as our members are coming to us for help during this time of crisis, everyone's experience is unique. What can we do to uniquely serve them in a way that makes sense? Number 5, challenge your team members to find the good. Some days it's hard and you gotta dig really deep to find the good, but challenge them too. And oftentimes we'll start our team meetings with successes. What's one thing that you're proud of that you were a part of in the past week, right? So challenge as leaders, sometimes it's just simply asking questions. During the experiential facilitation program that we did in Mombasa a couple years ago, we talked a lot about using questions, and leaders can use questions in a really positive way to bring out the best in people and find the good. Consider shifting priorities based on the individual. So during this time of pandemic, some people might have more capacity than others just based on the roles and the needs. I was on the phone yesterday, for example, with somebody in our meetings and events area. Well, we're not having meetings and events, right? They're just not taking place. People aren't traveling to meetings and events. And so that particular individual had some capacity. And so she was offering or volunteering to say, hey, I can take on some projects from other departments or other areas. So as leaders, we need to be aware of that so that we can make sure we're leveraging the gifts and strengths of each person by shifting priorities back and forth. This one's a hard one for leaders. This is one I have to remind myself of very often. It's okay to not be okay, even for leaders. Our CEO at our company, as soon as the crisis hit, he has been doing a weekly video chat for our employees, and it's been fantastic. And in there, he talks often about we all want to do the best we can, but we're not expecting perfection. During this time, we had to move 3,500 employees from working in an office to working at home in less than 48 hours because our offices could not be open during the pandemic. And so we had to do that. So people are helping members on the phone. They're helping members during times of crisis and even death or disability in their families. We're an insurance company, so we're providing support for families and for individuals. And they're doing it in ways, and you might have a kid screaming behind you or a dog coming and jumping on your lap or things like that. And so life is different now, and it is for a while. So it's okay to not be okay. And like I said, I have to remind myself as a leader of that as well. So Drew, if we're headed toward the end here, I want to just talk about some resources that you are all going to have available to you following this material. So in addition to the slides themselves, you're going to get 3 tools. So the first tool is an emotional intelligence quick assessment. So this is an opportunity for each of you as leaders to just take a look at the assessment, all 18 of those competencies, and think about where you might fall as a leader on them to help build a plan of what you can do to develop in those competencies. As I mentioned at the very beginning, emotional intelligence can be learned, and it is learned through practice, and it's learned through feedback. And so part of the exercises following this session will be an opportunity for you to get some feedback and have interactions with other people. So an emotional intelligence quick assessment will be coming.
All right.
The second one, I'm going to ask you to actually sit down with another leader. It could be somebody at your own Sacco, or it could be somebody at the Apex organization. It could be a mentor of yours. It could be a leader of another Sacco that you have a relationship with. So have a discussion with them and think about these things. Again, in the materials, you'll have a lot of materials to go deeper into these areas. But the first one is, what's a situation where you've used one of the leadership styles effectively? And what's your go-to, right? What is your go-to leadership style? For me, it's usually visionary or coaching. Those are the 2 that I typically would use the most. So What leadership style do you use the most? And have that conversation with another leader. And then how does that style help you build resonance or connection with other people in a positive way? And then where might that be ineffective? I like to be a big picture, right? And visionary, think about the future. Well, sometimes you have to just deal with the tactical now, right here, the tactical situations. That's where that style is not as effective, when you have to build that very specific plan, right? And so how do you then have to switch to a different leadership style to accomplish the results? So I encourage you, and there's a handout worksheet in the materials to help you have that conversation with another leader. And then finally, do some reflection. This is the do part. Build an action plan. And these questions, there's a handout for you in the materials with a worksheet to say, where do I want to develop? What style do I want to develop? What are some of the competencies, when you look at those 18 competencies in more detail, where you think you want to dig deeper on them? And then once you complete the self-assessment, what are some of the competencies where you might want to focus on more for your leaders? So here's the big idea, right? The best leaders, those leaders who are the most effective in leading their Sacco, those best leaders, they find effective ways to not only understand, but also improve their own emotions and those of other people, and how they interact with those around them. And that's going to lead to better business results, keeping the great talent that we have, building and maintaining higher morale, motivating our employees and our communities where we live and serve, and ultimately, it's going to lead to greater commitment moving forward. So remember the words of the poet Maya Angelou. And she said, you've probably heard this quote many times. It's one of my favorites. She says, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. That's what emotional intelligence is all about. I remember those pictures that I showed earlier of George and Lois and so many others, and those big smiles on their faces, right? What I remember about the experiences that I had in Kenya 2 years ago were how the Sacco leaders, how people made me feel. I'll remember that forever. That's the most important piece. That's the big idea. That's going to lead to all of these things. So in the years ahead, people are going to remember two things about this pandemic. When they look back at 2020, they're going to remember two things. They're going to remember how they got through it themselves. And they're also going to remember the leaders who led the way. So my final question, Juf, before I hand it over to you is, how will people remember you? How will they remember each of us as leaders when they look back on 2020 and how we responded to the pandemic and other things going on around us? Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk through this high level. Again, it was a high level overview of emotional intelligence. You could go any number of ways and spend a whole lifetime in a career probably digging deeper into it. Hopefully this session has got your appetite whetted just a little bit to go dig deeper. So with that, Mr. Moderator, I will turn it over to you for questions.
Thank you very much, Gerry. That was typical Gerry, but without the classroom situation. I'm sure by now you would have turned in a couple of handouts to answer questions and some group activities and all that, notwithstanding the distance and the virtuality of all this. I think you got us thinking, and you got us engaged, you got us involved. And that's the true way of getting learning occur. I'm sure our audience are following. We have 86 of them with us on this journey. Maureen will be coordinating the questions from Nairobi. Gerry is in Montana. I am in Gambia. So this is the new normal.
Yes.
Just coming on to those two questions, Gerry, how will our members remember us post-COVID? We all hope and pray that we see the end of this pandemic, or we are here when COVID is put under control, whatever the format is, and that we continue to have the opportunity to serve our members and continue to do things that will change the lives of our members, will improve their livelihoods, their living conditions, And yes, great questions. And I think all of us listening out there should be reflecting on those two questions. How do we want to be remembered? How do we think our actions during the crisis will influence how people remember us tomorrow? Very, very, very important. Gerry, thank you very, very, very much. I didn't expect anything less. I knew you would present and everyone will understand. I will always say, if you still have questions about emotional intelligence and how leaders can use this during this crisis, I'll ask you the question, where were you? Because that was really, really explosive. So Maureen, I know you have a survey. You also would have some questions from our audience. You coordinate that level between, there we go. So our audience are going to answer those survey questions. High emotional intelligence help leaders to motivate others to excel, manage and control stress levels, communicate more effectively, retain talent. Others send to information at accosca.org. So let's go on and choose one. Please select one from the screen in front of you. Maureen, I am not sure. My screen is not allowing me to choose, maybe as the moderator, but I assume the other participants are being allowed. So go
Yes,
on and click and, okay, they're being allowed. Thank you, Maureen. That's a quick poll. So you go on and fill that. Maureen will give the results, and I'm sure Gerry will comment on that. Right, there we go. Gerry, you have the screen in front of you.
Yes.
Your audience believe 31% of them would say motivate others to excel. 29 say manage and control stress levels. 29, same percentage, communicate more effectively. Retaining talent, 10 of them believe. And yes, there we go. You want to speak to that quick survey of your audience reaction to that question? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, so as we all know, high emotional intelligence helps us do all of these, right? So I'm understanding that each of you chose one that you felt was most important for you. Pretty good balance across the first three. Motivation is really important, especially around others to excel. Helping to lead stress levels. Stress levels are higher now during this pandemic than they've probably ever been. And so what can we do as leaders to make sure we help our employees and others around us to manage those levels? And then help with communication. And if you think about it, all three of those together, if you're an employee in an organization where somebody's looking out for you to excel, motivating you, helping you manage your stress, and helping with communication, that's going to help with retention, right, of retaining talent too. So they're really all connected. So I appreciate the balance that you've shown across each of these areas.
That's grand. And between 39 and 29% will be a negligible difference, meaning, you know, so I mean, the balance is there. The first three definitely have the bulk of the answers. And that would resonate. We're talking about resonant leadership. It resonates with the retention approach or strategy of the organization. So Maureen, do we have another quick poll question? Okay, I assume at this point we'll be receiving questions. All right. I manage conflicts at my workplace by avoiding potential triggers, using empathy, facing it and addressing root causes, willing to compromise, staying calm. Again, the audience, you're required to choose one. Select one out of the 5 options. Right? Do we have the answer? Right, there we go. Gerry, that's an interesting one this time. Managing
Yes, it is.
conflict at workplace. This one is interesting. Facing it and addressing root causes gets 68% of the votes. Avoiding potential triggers is 12%. Empathy, using empathy, is 16%. Willing to compromise is 2%. And staying calm takes 2%. Your views?
My views, I'm going to say yes. What I mean by that, Juf, is obviously facing conflict head on and addressing the root cause. Those are important. And so I appreciate that so many people said, yep, we need to get to the bottom of the conflict. And the part I would say where emotional intelligence comes in is, in order to effectively face it and address the root cause, we have to use these other things, right? Every one of us on triggers, every one of us has triggers, right? What are those things that just send us off the edge, right? What are those triggers? We have to make sure we're aware of them, because if we're facing the root cause, what if you're the root cause, right? So what if there's conflict at work and you realize after digging deeper that it's something that you're doing as a leader? Well, we need to make sure we're avoiding those triggers that might cause it to escalate. We need to face and address the root cause with empathy. We need to stay calm, right? That's a big part of that balance we talked about, of balancing the thinking brain and the emotional brain. And the ability to do that during a crisis, to stay calm, is so important. And often we do need to be willing to compromise. I know it's hard, because with compromise, everybody loses or gives up something, right? So sometimes that's hard. But during the root cause phase of addressing conflict, I believe, Juf, that you need to use the other four, right? So to me, the other four that have lower ratings right now, all are necessary in order to truly face it and address the root cause.
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree. I can't agree more. Definitely, that's you have to use the other devices, the other instruments, to be able to face and address the root causes of any conflicts at the workplace. All right, Maureen?
I'll make one more comment. Maureen, before you switch, let me make one more quick comment on this. I don't know if you can go back. It might be too late. The other thing I'll say that I appreciate about the folks who responded to the survey, if you do all the other four, right? So if you avoid your triggers, you stay calm, you have empathy, and you're willing to compromise. If you do all of those things, but you don't face and address the root cause, you're not going to accomplish anything either, right? So it can't be just emotional intelligence. It has to be action, right? You have to do something. That's why my last word on the slide was do, right? We have to be able to, as leaders, we can't just approach everything and say, oh, bummer, right? We have to actually address it and do it. So that's what I also appreciate about the responses. We have to be willing to take action as leaders. Okay, now we can move on.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Gerry. Thank you. Next, Maureen. Right, audience, here we go with poll number 3. While hiring for a top position, I would prioritize a candidate with technical ability, emotional intelligence, experience, other, that may be sent to accosca.org. So select one.
Maureen, you're asking some really tough questions here.
Yeah, I'm just grateful for asking me and putting me on the spot. So,
yes. Yeah.
So, yes, Maureen, got the answers, results in? Right. Wow.
Survey says.
Ah,
Very, yeah, very
technical
interesting. And I
ability,
wonder,
25%.
yeah,
You go on.
okay. I wonder, Drew, if the other, when there's 4% who said other, I wonder if they sent a note to Maureen that said all the above, right? If you could only choose one.
Right. Yeah,
Right. And
absolutely.
I think, especially for leadership roles, right? For roles where they're, you're leading other people in particular, emotional intelligence is really high, right? If the leader could have the best technical ability, have this wonderful experience, but if they are unable to relate to others, he or she would not be as effective. So emotional intelligence makes a lot of sense that that's a key area you're looking for. For individual contributor positions, right, where they're not managing other people, if they're interacting with members, emotional intelligence is important. Be able to establish rapport, to have empathy into those things is really important. They also have to be able to do the job, right? So technical ability and experience are necessary and they're important. So I want to put an exclamation point on that. When we talk about emotional intelligence as being critical and vital for leaders and for people, right? If we're in the service industry where we're serving members, we have to have it. We also have to be able to do the job. So we have to have the technical abilities, and having experience is great. And I've described, like with young people, you could have a young person who's coming right out of university who has amazing emotional intelligence, amazing intelligence. They don't have any experience. So what the great opportunity for that is to give them experience, to give the young people experience so they can leverage those gifts and talents around emotional intelligence as well. So good. This was a tricky one. So Maureen, this was a tricky question for folks. So I really appreciate, I really appreciate how you all responded to it. Juf, what would you say? What are your thoughts on this?
I would really go back to what you kicked off the answer with, all of the above, because really performance depends on critically the technical ability and the experience, which is the context. But emotional intelligence is what weaves the two together. You have to have the technical ability, have the experience, but then you need the emotional intelligence bit, just like it is sandwiched here between technical ability and experience. You need emotional intelligence to get on. And really, yes, all of the above. But yes, giving emotional intelligence the larger share here is understandable.
Right. That's good. And I would say if you're familiar with the book Good to Great, and Jim Collins is the author of that book. It's been around a long time. It's a classic business book. And to me, Juf, just what you said, all three are necessary. What separates good leaders from great leaders is emotional intelligence. Good leaders can get the job done. Good leaders have experience. Good leaders can work with other people. Great leaders fully embody all 18 of those competencies around emotional intelligence, and they use it to the maximum, right? That's what separates good from great.
That's right. Great.
So we have one last poll question, and then we can go to what the attendees have asked. Just one last one.
Okay. Thank you, Maureen. Wow. Conflicts and opportunity for growth. Select one. Pretty straightforward. Right. You have just two options. So you either have a yes or no. So again, 88 attendees still on the program. Go on and answer that that poll question, please. Here we go.
Yeah, conflicts are a great
Are you
opportunity
surprised, Gerry?
I'm not surprised. I think, yeah, I totally agree. I agree that they're an opportunity for growth. Most of us don't like conflict. Conflict is not fun. Conflict can be painful. It can be emotional, right? Back to our topic today. And it's a great opportunity for growth. I talk about learning and Drew, if you mentioned this early on, that a big part of my background is in learning and experiential learning in particular. In experiential learning, sometimes there's conflict or sometimes there's pain. And I go back to the way little kids learn, right? For those of us who have children, when they're first learning to walk, or they're first learning to ride a bicycle, or first learning to do something, oftentimes there's conflict, right? You stand up, you start wobbling, and then you fall down, right? And you get a bruise. Or you're riding a bike and you fall over on the bike and you have to get back up. Those are like conflicts in a lot of ways, right? And so I describe it as the learning, the real learning, the growth happens in the wobbles, right? It's in the wobbles. It's not the complete fall down, but that does happen, right? So that does happen, but the learning is really in the wobbles. What are we going to do during that time of wobble? Are we going to rely on other people? Are we going to rely on ourselves? Are we going to rely on systems or processes around us, et cetera? So how can we use conflict in a positive way as an opportunity for growth, not just for us, but for those that we lead?
Great. Gerry, you are DE, you are ADE, you also from your Carib DE. So
Yes,
African DEs on the program here are very much aware that Accosca takes conflict as a development issue in Africa, and we do have a lot of conversation around this. But it's like beyond the high-level conflict that you were thinking between nations, and it's conflict all over the institution and around our workers, our members, and all that. And what a better time! I don't think there could be a better time to reflect on conflict than these times when some of us are losing jobs, some of us are finding it difficult to go back to work. You're talking about working from home; it's happening all over the world. In Africa, you want to work from home and the internet is not allowing you. All these are issues that, help us grow. So you have to find a way to work around it. And I think that's the point Gerry is making. So yes, significantly, conflict helps us to grow. So Maureen, do we have questions from our participants?
We have one question from Sally from Kenya Bankers. She's asking, what tactics would you prescribe to a team member in a scenario where the top leadership's tone is one of dissonance, affecting the team morale and productivity during this challenging time? Seeing as from your presentation, each and every team member has a role to play in the circles.
Sure.
Right. That's a fantastic question. And Drew, I know too that going through DE, for example, sometimes if it's not the leader going through DE, right, it's somebody who's in the organization, maybe somewhere else in the organization, and they leave DE saying, "This is great, but I don't know how I could do this at my Sacco or my credit union because my leader wouldn't support these things." So Sally, I appreciate your question. Thinking about if you're not the leader and your leader actually provides a dissonant leadership style, how can you and how can each team member leverage emotional intelligence? I'm going to say two things. Drew, you might have some thoughts too, but I'll say two things initially, Sally. The first one is control what you can control. So part of emotional intelligence, there's this thing called the internal locus of control. And what that says is, if you think about all the things around us right now that are causing stress, and we've got a lot of them, and then go down and mark the ones that are truly within our control, we'll find that most of those things that are causing us stress are totally out of our control. So, Sally, what I would say for your circumstance is to encourage your peers, right? Encourage those at the Sacco to control what they can control. And what I mean by that is the thing we can control, we can always control how we respond. I can't control how others respond, but I can always control how I respond to a circumstance. And if I make sure that I am responding with high emotional intelligence, right? So high self-awareness and self-regulation and high others awareness and influencing others, that will rub off. It might take a while and it might be frustrating, but it will rub off on others, especially when you're doing it and then a peer does it and another peer does it and others do it. Ultimately, that will make a difference, even if the leader is still using a dissonant style. The second thing, thing I would say, Juf, and then I'll hand over to you. The second one I would say is feedback. Now, back to that conflict piece, right? Providing conflict and addressing the root cause is really, really hard. And sometimes it's not feasible, right? It's not practical because it might hurt your career or something. But being able to provide that feedback to the leader is really important. To say, here's the impact of this action or these words. Here's the impact it has on our morale and our team. To find a way to provide that feedback in a positive way, I think would be important. So those would be my two. Control what you can control and then give feedback.
Great, Gerry. Actually, I think the prescription is good enough. The only thing I can add to that is the fact that, with time, over time, Sally, you will realize that you've influenced your leader enough to bring him or her into your fold. You just need to be consistent and persistent with, be who you are. Don't be swayed into, and that comes back to what Gerry said, control what you can control, be yourself. And that authentic leadership you present might and could influence your leader to join your fold. Because remember, Gerry said in the presentation, emotional intelligence can be learned. So you can influence your leader by virtue of the way you behave, the way you act towards. And again, back to that quotation Gerry brought and that demonstration, you smile to people, they smile back to you. So you can influence them to come and join your fold. Very, very important question, Sally. Any other question, Maureen?
Yes, we have another one from Abdul Karim Say. He's asking, what is your opinion to someone who says experience is not measurable during recruitment?
Gerry.
So during the recruiting phase of bringing on talent, that experience is not measurable. Is that the question, Maureen? And to comment on that.
Yes.
Right. So during recruitment, I know we look at a lot of things, right? And my recommendation is you don't ever use any one single factor to say yes or no, right? To say we're going to hire or not hire. You have to use a lot of factors as you're bringing people on. Experience is one of those. And there's a lot of research that shows that past experience does influence future behavior or future action, right? So you can look at somebody's past experience to say, if they responded in these ways in the past, they're likely to respond in similar ways in the future. Now, I appreciate your comment that how do you measure that, right? That's your question. That's the root of your question is, how do you then measure that experience? I'm going to give, again, two. I'm trying to keep it simple for myself. Otherwise, I can't keep up with all of them. I'm going to give two suggestions. One is through reference checks, right? So when you're having conversations with their previous employers, previous experiences, you can validate, right? So you can use a reference check. I don't know, I'm assuming you do reference checks there as well. We do reference checks a lot in the United States. So we're calling back on when they say on their resume or say wherever, here's my work experience, we call them and talk to them about it and try to find out about their performance, right? And their level of performance and as much information as we can to help us in the hiring decision. So a reference check or validating that experience can be one measurable, you can measure that. You can measure that for sure. So that's a measurable one.
Oh.
The second one is a little more complicated. The second one is really more around through the interview questions themselves. So it's a little bit trickier. So I use what's called the STAR method of interview questions. So STAR, S-T-A-R. And so this can get at your question a little bit to measure. So I'll ask a question. Let's say the question is around coaching. And I want to find out how Juf is able to coach other people, right? And so I'm going to ask him a question. And rather than just say, are you a good coach or tell me about your coaching, I'm going to actually say, Juf, use the STAR method, S-T-A-R. So think about a time in your experience when you were coaching another person. What I want you to do is to describe the situation or task. That's the S and T of STAR. What's the situation or task? So what was going on? The A is what action did you take? So Juve, specifically, what did you do? What did you say? What happened? How was, what was the conversation? What was the action you took? And then the R is what was the result? What was the outcome? So STAR, so situation or task, action, and then result. And if you ask that type, it's called a behavior-based question. If you can ask those questions to get at the root of the experience you're trying to measure, I believe you can get pretty close to measuring it. Now, is it statistically accurate, right, to the nth degree with, the stopwatches and the lab coats? Probably not. But between that and the reference checks and any other testing that you might do, those kinds of things, I think will give you a pretty good sense for their the measurable piece of that. Juf, what would you add from your experience? You've done some hiring.
Oh, yeah, not much. I think the question is a very interesting one. You gave it a very, very good go. The experience bit, sometimes it's the comparison between the skills and talents the person is coming with versus the weighting you are giving to the experience the person might have had. I like your STARS approach. I've just taken note of that, but I think the answer you've given is comprehensive enough. That's good enough. It answers the question. I love that. Maureen, any other question?
No, we don't have any other questions.
Great. So Gerry is the master. We had a great 1.5 hours. I think I learned a lot as usual. I wish we have an opportunity very soon, if not this October, hopefully before next October, we should be coming together and doing a lot more work on TOTs and all that. The audience, you need to know one thing about Gerry. He doesn't like this kind of classroom where he does the talking. He wants to do a lot of work. He wants to do a lot of action, and then you do the learning yourself. Unfortunately,
Amen.
COVID is not giving us that opportunity, but that's Gerry. But I can tell you, you were nothing less today. You came out, you brought in the skills, the talent is there. No wonder the message went through. I really, really found this very educative and exciting. And Maureen may want to have a comment. If George is in the background, I'll want him to say something to Gerry. Hello, Maureen.
Yes, let's see if we can be able to unmute him.
Yes, if you can unmute him. You can also make a comment. And I'm not sure Lois is in the background. Is she in Florida? Dixie, you can say something. We still have some time. You can unmute both of them and allow them to say something to, yeah?
Judge is there.
I will just remind you. Yeah, as Maureen's unmuting them, I'll just remind you of the handout. There's a handout that you can access to with the additional follow-up.
The handout, yes, the handout will be going around. Maureen will be circulating that. So, George, are you there? Good afternoon, good evening now.
Thank you. Thank you, Juve. Thank you, Gerry. This was an excellent engagement, and as usual, Gerry in supporting us with the leadership skill and kind of the knowledge management that we keep on longing for to share this kind of experience. I know, Gerry, we can't thank you more than this. I mean, you've been having spent that time. I know you're on vacation, but thank you. This will go a long way in helping us continue having a conversation of the importance of emotional intelligence versus experience versus the usual IQ that people think is important. You brought it well. Thank you, and we look forward to engaging with you further.
Thank you, George. Thank you so much.
Thank you, George.
For your kind comment.
Thanks,
and
George.
thank you,
Maureen,
for putting all this up.
Thank you. Thanks so
Slides
much.
is on.
Thanks. Do we have Lois? She's
I am
on. Lois,
also
good.
on. Hello, Juve. How are you?
Morning.
Good morning from
Very, very well,
Orlando,
man. How you
Florida.
doing?
I also want to say
How's Florida?
it is hot, 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 but also beautiful.
Oh,
This is our hot, rainy
as
season.
always.
Feeling it. Unlike Montana, which I think can get hot too, but not quite as Florida.
Not quite hot.
Yeah, I'm looking out at the mountains. We still have snow out there right now, so there's snow on our mountains.
Which, unless you've ever experienced snow, it's wet and cold. So I also want to say too how much I enjoyed this webinar. As many of you know, Gerry and I have worked together a lot through the years. I think we have very similar training styles. But even with all of this, I learned a lot today. I was also reminded of a lot of things we need to think about. Many of us think that our personality is who we are and that we cannot change. And Gerry made it very obvious, simple ways we can start thinking differently how we interact with people. So I really enjoyed. It's also interesting to say that Gerry said people were having interesting dreams. Well, I am really kind of sequestering inside my house right now, and I'm having some pretty crazy dreams. So I can relate to what he's talking about. I really encourage all of the participants to take time to go through the handouts. I think you're going to find that it is going to add so much depth to the short conversation that Gerry has given you this morning. I know when he normally does EQ presentations, it could be a day, 2, or even a week. So this was a great overview of what can come. So take a few minutes, go through the handouts and think through what's happened today. Juve, it's so great to see you. Gerry, it's great to see you. Technology is amazing. We're all around the world, and yet we can talk to each other. So love to all my friends in Africa.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lois. Thank you, Gerry. Thank you once more. It's been great on behalf of Accosca, the Africa movement, and all participants in today's program. We look forward to having you our way sometime in the future. George, we challenge you to bring us Gerry back. Thank you very much for this one. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you all.
Yes.
Yep.
Maureen, just keep the links.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thanks so much, Maureen, for putting us together. Thanks so much. Thanks.
Yes. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
You all have a great rest of your day and evening.
You too.
Thanks, Gerry. Bye-bye.